art gets off on you losing control of your emotions, and this is something which, again, is not, I don't think, a sufficient argument for exiling art from our lives, since we have emotions, and acknowledging and engaging with them is really the only way to manage and deal with them. But it is something that we would do better to think more about. We have this idea in our society, which is a very weird idea, which we only don't think of it as weird because it's so pervasive. That art for art's sake is just kind of a good per se, right? That if you have the more art, the more emotion, the more passion, the better. And we have no moral concern, right? And of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you do kind of see people who say, well, maybe I shouldn't be watching like Game of Thrones, right? And I've taken issue with this attitude before, but it's like the impulse to say, well, maybe this has an effect on my soul, and I should be careful, right? How much of it I expose myself to, how much violence, how much sex, how much passion. That is a very normal impulse because of this phenomenon that Plato is identifying. That art is essentially weapons grade emotion, and it's one of Aristotle's arguments is going to be that it gives us a kind of contained space, like for, like a kind of hazmat space where we can essentially encounter those emotions, find some outlet for them, and move on in the world without, either repressing them or giving full rein to them. That we have some kind of way of acknowledging and sort of appropriately encountering those emotions on the stage or in poetry and so forth, in art. And Plato is basically saying it's too dangerous, right? It's radioactive material. Handle with care. And in our current culture wars, we are having a big debate, about, or a big, let's say, reckoning with this form of argument, because we sort of went through a period like in the 60s and 70s where it's like, let a thousand flowers bloom, all art is sort of disconnected from, Vladimir Nabokov was a big figure in this, and, a lot of these kind of arguments that people had over like James Joyce's Ulysses, and this is going to be in a lot in How to Save the West, the book that's coming out, which you can pre-order now on Amazon if you want to talk more about this. But for now, we can just acknowledge that this concern that Plato is raising is coming right back up to the surface of our political debates, even though we thought we had moved beyond it. Oh, Plato's an old fuddy-duddy. Oh, he wants to exile the poets. No, he's dealing with something that is inescapable in art, which is that it has emotional power and therefore moral power, because our morality and our emotions are very tightly bound up, right? The way that we learn to feel about things, the way that we learn to react to our feelings about things, is essentially an expression of the things that we love and value. And the things that we love and value are in turn, definitive of our character. We behave as if something was the highest good, and that behavior is our moral character. So when you encounter something like art, right, which gives you some intense injection of desire or aspiration or inspiration or whatever, right? When you come up against Gandalf, riding over the hill with the cavalry, and that surge of emotion comes up in your heart, right? You cannot be morally neutral about that. You can't engage with that in a totally morally detached way. It's affecting you whether you like it or not. And we act as if we're in this culture war between left and right, where right is saying, like, wagging its finger and saying, oh, don't do this, right? This is bad. It's bad to see gore and violence. And the left is saying, just do everything all the time, whatever. But that's actually not how our culture wars work. What's really happening is you have a right that is concerned about gore, violence, and over-sexualization in art. And you have a left that is equally concerned about racism, sexism, and depictions of old-fashioned ideals in art, right? Both sides of this culture war, whatever you may think about them, and I think, each of them is wrong, although I think the left is more wrong, but I think each of them is kind of missing the point, right? Nevertheless, each of them is engaging in the Platonic kind of arguments. They're saying the things that you see in the world shape your perception of what is possible and what is desirable, and therefore we need to seize control of the artistic means of production and create an art world that depicts the things we want to see depicted.